How you doing, YouTube? Matt Massa Beer Reviews back with a little bit of Trillium up in this piece in the form of their Hatch Shell. Yeah, this is a 7.1% India Pale Ale, brewed in Massachusetts. This was canned a week and a half ago. Not even. Actually, no. 7 days ago. Comes courtesy of my boy Corey. This is in collaboration with the Esplanade Association. I assume that's what that is right here. And I'm very, very curious about this beer. So Corey, very cool of him, sent off a huge box of a bunch. I'm going to pour this aggressively because I want to make a point here with this beer. And it actually looks pretty damn good. So that's a horrible pour, but that's on purpose. He sent out a bunch of beers. He sent out a bunch of Treehouse, a bunch of Trillium. Yeah, see? He sent off 2 mystery beers. And I'm not going to lie to you. There's something about the Trillium beers that seem off for me. I'll post all the Trillium beers at the same time. The reason why I poured this hyper aggressively is because the heads on these have been dying like a maniac. And as you can see, I poured this to the point where I shouldn't be able to actually get close to getting a nose in this beer because the head's so big and it's almost completely gone. I think that's a lot. That's telling a lot about these beers. You know, I mean, it looks fine. It's got this rich orange core, nice cataracty edges to it. But it seems like a lot of the Trillium beers I've had as of late, and I know this is kind of a disservice to this beer because I'm talking about what I'm expecting in my experience over the past couple days reviewing some of their beers. But it's been so kind of consistent, it's hard not to talk about it, that they're just, something's off. It's a carbonation issue. It's a carbonic acid issue. It's actually a hypercarbonic acid issue is what I think it is. It's not the same. We'll see what's what. You know, I talked for a minute. The head is gone, and I poured it like a monster. Label-wise, it's fantastic. It's what Trillium does. Beer-wise, the beer itself, if you don't focus on the head, looks all the part of what you want from a hazy IPA, but man, just kind of missing something there when it comes to the actual head on the beer itself. Give it a little bit of a roll, generate a little bit more of a head, try to get a nose. I mean, it's citrus, pineapple, a little bit of stone fruit, a little bit of kind of like sharp tropical fruit. Nothing too aggressive. Vibrant, nothing overly aggressive. There's a bittering component to it, rather generic. But there's definitely that kind of seltzer war carbonic thing, you know, kind of floating around there, expecting it going in, and it's kind of just showing itself, you know, a little bit more and more, especially when I drink more and more of these Trillium beers. They just show themselves with that carbonic thing. Now, that's not an everybody kind of issue. I know a lot of people that just don't even know what I'm talking about because they just don't perceive it in beers, but it's absolutely, and it's not so much that like I'm the only one that gets it. There's a lot of people that actually do kind of get that kind of seltzery thing from these beers, and not just from Trillium. So it's not like I'm like the outlier in this kind of thing, but yeah, I mean, there's a decent kind of fruitiness, what you'd expect from like a 7 and change kind of Trillium beer, but there's something else going on. Let's just dive in. Cheers. And that's exactly what it is. You know, there's this thinness to it, undercarbonation to it. Even though I swirl it, and it brings this carbonation back with the way that kind of that carbonic, the carbonation of the beer with the combination of how that carbonic acid kind of comes off, it just makes this beer thin. It makes this beer bittering without like a cool kind of balance of bittering to it. It's more that kind of seltzerly acidic kind of thing going on. You do get that fruit portion of the show. It's not nearly as aggressive as it needs to be able to hold up to that carbonic side of things, but it's there. But the mouth feels thin. The beer itself is just, you know, relatively undercarbonated. That seltzerly carbonic acid, that citric acid kind of thing is quite high. it's just meh. It's not good beer. It honestly isn't. It's lazy. It's almost like autopilot stuff at this point. I don't take this shit lightly. I don't sit here and like just rip or poop or be negative towards beer just because I'm a douchebag. Sure, I'm an asshole. Sure, I can have my my bouts of whatever. But when I sit and kind of lean into a brewery, rail, for lack of a better term, on a brewery about these kind of things, it's not like off the cuff. It's not a whim to where I'm like, I feel like being a douche towards Trillium. That is 1,000,000,000% not the case. And that's kind of what ends up happening sometimes. The kind of the perception of us talking heads on the internet. It's like that's kind of what people think. They're like, oh, this person's got a bone to pick, or they are just being whatever. And I can't express that. Just not the case. It's what is in front of me is why I'm talking about the things I talk now. Listen, I have a beer from Trillium that comes off this way, and it's kind of it's a little bit kind of this way and that way or whatever, and that's an aberration. That's a outlier. That's the exception, not the rule. It's like there's no conversation to be had. It's like that we all sometimes we swing and miss. Happens to the best of us. But when there's a pattern to be had, and we're not talking about 2 beers. We're not talking about the beers that Corey sent to me. We're not talking about the past couple of months. We're talking about a year now of consistent of the same exact thing. There's head dying off. There's not much to the beer. And that's the thing, too. At first, when I had 1 or 2 of these from Corey's box, I know the box sat outside for a couple hours. White box in the shade. Got here in a day. It's not like it sit a bunch of heat, but I'm like, maybe the heat had something to do with it. But when I think back and I talk and I remember the beers that I've had from Trillium over the past year and a half, and they've all been this, I'm like, okay, then that's not the case. Some have been directly handed to me. Some have been, mailed to me. Some, there's multiple different ways I've procured these beers, and there's a consistent theme throughout them. And that is, I don't know what the fuck is going on. Like, honestly, well, I do know what's going on. Not to, I don't want to talk about what I assume is going on, but I think it's just a growth thing where it's like, okay, how do we make more beer? It's that simple. I mean, honestly, it's like, how do we produce beer? How do we produce the beers that we produce with a smaller kind of... How do we increase the profit margin on what we produce? That's probably that's my assumption of what's going on. And it really is a shame. You know what I mean? Because Trillium was kind of, and I say was, kind of like, up there. But it's been long enough. It's been over a year with the same consistent, head dying off, huge carbonic thing, hot presence isn't as big, mouthfeel's gone. You know what I mean? Those kind of things have gotten so consistent that it's not a fluke. It's not an exception. It's the trend. And that is a super, super duper bummer because I got Trillium bottles, man, all over the place. I love Trillium. But this is just not good beer, honestly. Or it's not a good hazy. I'm sure they're making great stuff, but the stuff that I've had, and it's past the point. I don't want to I shouldn't have to sit here and kind of try to explain excuse and after excuse. I think I can just say meh, and that's stand on its own merit. It's not even just like okay. It's like negative, and that sucks. Really, really sucks. So there's a citrus portion of the show. There's a little bit of tropical fruit that's battling back and forth. This huge seltzer component, this big carbonic acid thing. It's thin. It's undercarbed. Is this one of the better IPAs I've had as of late? No, not even close. Value and availability. Let me know what you paid for it, Corey. And leave you with if you like what we like. This if you like Trillium over the past year and a half. If you like them over the past year and a half, you will like this beer. There you go. We're reviewing the books. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you've had this. What are you drinking? What are you tasting when you drink this beer? I'm really, really curious. Massive Beers, if you want to check me out doing the social media stuff. Beer Massif, my podcast. We've talked to JC before from Trillium on the podcast when it was a radio show previously. So you can go check that out. So hopefully you guys enjoyed our review. Hopefully you're enjoying good beer right now. Hopefully see you next time. Cheers.